Picture this. You're getting ready for the most important social event of your life in 18th century Europe. You powder your face, lace up your corset, and then you place a towering mountain of white curls on your head that hasn't been washed in months and is literally crawling with vermin. Welcome to the grotesque world of powdered wigs, where fashion quite literally came with a side of pestilence, and looking good meant living with creatures that would make a horror movie director weep with joy. What I'm about to tell you about these seemingly elegant hairpieces will forever change how you view those portraits of founding fathers and European aristocrats. Because beneath that pristine white powder and those perfectly sculpted curls lurked a nightmare that would make even the bravest souls reach for the nearest bottle of industrial-strength shampoo. But before we dive headfirst into this historical horror show, make sure you're subscribed to our channel because we're about to uncover the disgusting truths that your history teacher definitely didn't want you to know. The powdered wig wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a walking, talking advertisement for everything wrong with 18th century hygiene. These towering monuments to vanity were essentially luxury apartments for every creepy crawly you can imagine. We're talking about lice, fleas, mice, and in some documented cases even small rats who had set up permanent residence in the elaborate curls and hidden compartments of these ridiculous hairstyles. Let me paint you a picture of what daily life was like for someone wearing one of these fashion disasters. Lady Catherine Montague, a prominent English socialite, wrote in her diary about waking up to find mouse droppings scattered across her pillow every morning. But here's the truly revolting part. She considered this completely normal. The mice weren't just visitors. They were permanent tenants who had gnawed through the horsehair and human hair that formed the base of her wig, creating a network of tunnels that would make a subway system jealous. The construction of these wigs was like building a five-star hotel for parasites. Wig makers would start with a base of horsehair, add layers of human hair purchased from the poor, and then bind it all together with a mixture of animal fat, flour, and starch. This concoction created the perfect breeding ground for every disgusting creature imaginable. The powder used to achieve that pristine white color, it was made from flour, rice powder, and sometimes even lead. Yes, the same lead that was slowly poisoning the wearer's brain. But wait, it gets worse. These wigs weren't just infested with small creatures. The larger, more elaborate wigs worn by the wealthy sometimes housed entire ecosystems. French courtiers reported finding bird nests built into the towering structures, complete with eggs and baby birds. Imagine trying to maintain your composure during a formal dinner while tiny chirping sounds emanate from your head. The Marquise de Pompadour, mistress to King Louis XV, once had her hairdresser discover a family of mice that had been living in her elaborate coiffure for over 2 months. They had established a complete colony, with multiple generations of rodents calling her hairpiece home. The hairdresser counted 17 mice before giving up. The worst part? The Marquise was more concerned about the structural damage to her wig than the health implications of sharing her head with a rodent metropolis. The maintenance routine for these monstrosities was a medieval nightmare disguised as a beauty ritual. Wig owners would visit their hairdressers once a week, not to clean the wig, but to have the visible layer of powder refreshed and the structure rebuilt. The hairdresser would literally excavate dead insects, mouse nests, and decomposing organic matter from the depths of the wig before adding fresh powder on top. It was like putting makeup on a corpse and calling it beautiful. Professional wig cleaners, known as poudriers, developed an entire industry around managing these infestations. They used specialized tools that looked more like medieval torture devices than beauty implements. Long tweezers for extracting dead rodents, fine-toothed combs for removing lice eggs, and small hammers for breaking apart hardened clumps of powder mixed with bodily fluids. Some poudriers even kept cats in their shops, specifically to catch the mice that would inevitably escape during the cleaning process. The smell was absolutely horrific. Contemporary accounts describe the odor as a mixture of rancid animal fat, decomposing hair, mouse urine, and whatever rotting food particles had fallen into the elaborate curls during meals. Perfume wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity for anyone who wanted to remain in the same room as someone wearing a powdered wig. The wealthy would douse themselves in rose water and lavender oil, but even these powerful scents couldn't completely mask the putrid aroma emanating from their heads. Here's where the story takes an even more disturbing turn. The health consequences of wearing these infested hairpieces were severe and often fatal. The constant exposure to vermin led to widespread skin infections, scalp diseases, and in some cases, plague-like symptoms. The lead in the powder caused hair loss, brain damage, and death. Many aristocrats developed what we now know as lead poisoning, which explained the erratic behavior and mental instability that seemed to run rampant in European courts. The Duke of Marlborough's wife, Sarah Churchill, documented in her letters the horrific skin condition she developed from wearing elaborate wigs. Her scalp became so infected that pus would regularly seep through the powder, creating yellowish stains on her clothing. Yet she continued wearing wigs, because appearing in public without one would have been social suicide. She eventually developed what doctors today would recognize as severe dermatitis and bacterial infections that likely contributed to her early death at age 67. The social pressure to maintain these disgusting fashion statements was so intense that people would rather risk their health than appear unfashionable. Wealthy individuals often owned multiple wigs, not because they were clean, but because they needed backups when one became so infested that even 18th century standards couldn't tolerate it. The discarded wigs weren't thrown away, they were sold to the middle class, who would inherit not just the hair but the entire ecosystem of creatures living within. But here's what really shows how disconnected from reality these people were. They developed special tools to deal with the infestations. Wig combs were designed with long, thin teeth specifically for extracting dead mice and rats. There were special powders designed to kill lice without damaging the wig structure. Some of the wealthy even employed servants whose only job was to hunt the creatures living in their employer's hair. The invention of the wig scratcher, a long, ornate stick designed to reach underneath wigs to scratch infested scalps, became a status symbol in itself. These scratchers were often made of ivory or precious metals and were considered essential accessories for any well-dressed person. The fact that they needed specialized tools just to scratch their own heads should have been a red flag, but fashion apparently trumped common sense. The truly macabre part is that death didn't even free these people from their infested wigs. Many were buried wearing their powdered monstrosities, ensuring that they would spend eternity with their tiny roommates. Archaeological excavations of 18th century graves have revealed skeletons still wearing their wigs, complete with the preserved remains of the creatures that had made them their home. The powdered wig phenomenon finally began to decline, not because people suddenly developed common sense, but because of practical concerns. The French Revolution made elaborate wigs a target for revolutionaries, and the Napoleonic Wars made the imported materials too expensive. It took political upheaval and economic hardship to convince people to abandon a fashion trend that was literally eating them alive. The final nail in the coffin came when King George III of England suffered one of his famous episodes of madness during a public appearance. Witnesses reported seeing mice running out of his wig and across his shoulders while he was giving a speech to Parliament. The image of rodents fleeing the king's head became a symbol of the monarchy's disconnect from reality, and public opinion quickly turned against the elaborate wig fashion. Now, I need to provide some historical context here, because not everyone was walking around with vermin-infested headpieces. The most extreme examples I've described were primarily found among the ultra-wealthy who could afford the most elaborate wigs. Common people wore simpler versions, and many couldn't afford wigs at all. But the basic hygiene problems and health risks were universal among wig wearers of all social classes. So there you have it, the absolutely revolting truth about powdered wigs revealed. These weren't just fashion accessories, they were portable plague incubators that turned every social gathering into a potential disease convention. The next time you see a portrait of a distinguished 18th century gentleman or lady with their pristine white curls, remember that underneath that dignified exterior lurked a horror show that would make a zombie movie seem like a romantic comedy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to appreciate the fact that the worst thing hiding in my hair is maybe some leftover shampoo. And speaking of appreciation, make sure you subscribe to our channel because we've got plenty more historical nightmares to share. And trust me, the powdered wig situation is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the disgusting secrets of the past.